Remakes, a highly discussed topic within the gaming community during the past few years, for better or for worse, as some games like Resident Evil 2 Remake have redefined what it means to be a remake, or The Last of Us Part 1 on the other hand being talked about regarding whether it should have been remade, considering the age of the original. However, in my eyes, even though these two might touch upon the two different types of remakes, both of these games are stellar in my eyes, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk about in today's video. What makes a good remake? Remakes come in many different shapes and forms, and the reason why so many remakes end up being so successful varies from game to game, and it leads to an interesting discussion, which is why for today's video a special guest will be helping me delve into the topics of remakes, Friendly Forest 7, or I'll be calling him FF7 for short. I collabed with him last year on a video about Hotline Miami on his channel, which I recommend you check out, link in the description. But before we go deep into what makes a remake, we must first understand what exactly a remake is.
A remake, what exactly is it? This seems like an easy question to answer, but if you think about it, it's really not that simple. There are many definitions of a remake in multiple different ways. On one hand, a remake can be classified as a reimagining, taking everything the source material has done and making it better, removing outdated mechanics in place of new modernized mechanics, and taking in all the issues with the source material and rebuilding it by making it better, while trying to make it the best way possible to experience the original source material. This is how I define a remake, and games like Resident Evil 2 and the FF7 remake greatly describes that definition. But there are also remakes that really don't change anything, but are just built from scratch. Its core is still intact, but the outer layer is rebuilt for modern audiences and to suit the current generation, like better graphics or more quality of life mechanics. Games like the Crash N. trilogy and The Last of Us Part 1 are prime examples of this. These are essentially the two main definitions of a video game remake, but many people think that ports and remasters are also remakes, which is simply not true, which segues into our next section. One of the biggest misconcepted things people have about video game remakes is that remasters and ports fall under the category of it, which yeah, it's just simply not true. First of all, ports, I think it explains itself to be honest, but a port is just literally copying and pasting a game from another platform to another platform with very minimal differences. Well, except the controls, of course. But it's literally just to play a game on another console or platform. It keeps everything the same: graphics, story, gameplay, maybe even small exclusive differences. But other than that, it's just gimmicks. Examples of this can be Skyrim. Yeah, God knows how many times it's been re-released. Video game remasters, on the other hand, are actually pretty hard to describe. The best way to describe remasters is that it's a revamped version of the original. It's mostly the same, but it's optimized for the current gen, maybe better environments, added in-game mechanics like ray tracing, or even unlocking frame rates. But it doesn't rebuild games from scratch like video game remakes, but tend to build on the existing source material and adding to it to make the game more playable and more accessible. Prime examples of this are the Uncharted Legacy of Thieves collection, and even Super Mario 3D All-Stars, which actually kinda sucked, but since we got that out of the way, let's get back to the topics of video game remakes, and a perfect way to start is the different ways they're made.
So, one of the main reasons as to why games are remade is to bring back games that are praised back in their time and let new gamers play them with modern adjustments. Although companies could simply make a port and up the graphics like a remaster, issues that were fixed to the original game would still carry over and would be a problem, and ports like this typically work on games that still hold up despite their age, like Persona 4 Golden. There are many ways as to how game companies choose to remake their games, and you can divide them into three categories. Well, technically there are two, the first one being remaking the game and adding quality of life changes. This is by far one of the most common forms of doing remakes, simply taking what worked on the older generation of hardware and adding new additions to make it new and better, or going further, bringing the game closer to what they had initially envisioned when creating it. Take Link's Awakening on the Game Boy back in 1993 and compare it to its remake on the Switch in 2019. there were quite a few changes made with some extra additions. Now, I haven't played the original, but from the footage that I've seen of it, the biggest new change that has been done to this game is making it seamless. Gone are the PowerPoint slides that changes as you enter a new area within an area of the game, and instead, it has all been seamlessly connected with the exception of changing floors in dungeons or entering buildings, where a short fade in and out of black appears. You see, back in the day when hardware wasn't as fast or powerful as they are today, small technical improvements like this helped modernize the game for the better and justify the idea of the game being remade. Of course, there were some more additions added to Link's Awakening's remake, like a new dungeon and other finer details mentioned in this IGN article, who have in fact played the game, the original and the remake, unlike me. Sound quality and graphics are also key in remaking games, making them sound better with new sound chips and look better with just new technology, which we will get to shortly in a bit, but remakes have the chance of making the game more accessible for newer players. Take Metroid Zero Mission, a remake of the very first Metroid game. Matter of fact, I have played a bit of both, and for me personally, although I find the gameplay improvements and smoother transitions in Zero Mission to be a very nice addition, the biggest improvement is the map. The original Metroid is a nightmare to traverse, for me at least. Rooms look the same and can quickly blend in with each other. Zero Mission fixes this with a map system. I don't know what else to say, but maps rule, especially the in-game ones. And now we come to the big one of the key reasons and one of the first things that people look to when discussing the topics of remakes, and those are graphics. Although I personally don't see graphics as the prime factor for remaking a game, a lot of people quickly tend to jump to this argument first by saying this game still looks good and doesn't need a remake. Why, yes, graphical improvements can help to make the game visually pleasing. Graphical enhancements also help the developers bring the game closer to what they had originally envisioned all those years ago. Take Resident Evil 2 Remake. I am assuming that the way this game looks is what the developers had imagined the players to imagine how it felt to be in the RPD in the original, and with the remake, it facilitates this imagining and cuts right to the chase of reeling you in and immersing you in the world that they have created. By changing the camera view and gameplay, RPD of the original Resident Evil 2 is a game where you can see how the world is, compared to Resident Evil 2 Remake, where you are in the world, if you get what I mean. It's more lived in, you know? Other times, there are games that looked good on previous hardware and simply needed new improvements, but these improvements were so drastic that they would have to be remade from the ground up, compared to a simple remaster. Now, Xenoblade Chronicles, originally released to critical acclaim on the Wii, which was one of the best looking games on that system, was brought to newer hardware and looks like this. Amazing, am I right? I'm pretty sure it was a remaster, but please let me know if it actually was a remake, but yeah. But let's take a look at Shadow of the Colossus. Stunning game for its time, but was held behind by the hardware it was on. Now in 2018, Bluepoint remade the game, and I mean, just look. Sure, the game controls the same with some poor horse controls and other climbing movements, but that was how the game was intended and worked back then, so the objective of this remake was to bring its art and world to life. Truly, this game is a work of art and a beauty to behold. Although there were strong arguments to create a Shadow of the Colossus remake, the same cannot be said about all remakes. The recently released Dead Space remake was questioned if it needed a remake at all, and after having played it, I can confirm that Dead Space remake is a phenomenal game, or the upcoming Resident Evil 4 remake, as the original still holds up well to this day, but graphical improvements and modern controls could make this game drastically different from its original. The same cannot be said about The Last of Us Part 1. Unlike the three previously mentioned games, The Last of Us isn't even 10 years old yet, turning 10 in June of this year. And because of its age, the game is relatively modern. It controls pretty well, looks great visually, and its story was so watertight that there is no reason to differ from the original at all. But Naughty Dog did it and remade the game towards the tail end of last year. Now I will go out and say that The Last of Us Part 1 is an amazing game, but I'm very conflicted in calling it a remake. Yes, it was rebuilt from the ground up, but at the same time, it kinda isn't. The story remains the same, Joel practically controls the same, with the biggest addition being the haptic feedback on the new DualSense controller exclusive for the PS5, and the graphical enhancements. The game looks so good, and it's probably the best looking game based purely in terms of graphical fidelity. Why, yes, it still is a remake, at the same time it's more of a graphical remaster, and is one of the games that are brought back again for modern audiences to make it easier for them to visualize and immerse themselves in the worlds presented. It doesn't change the way the game runs like Link's Awakening or changes up the gameplay formula like Resident Evil 2 Remake, but alas, it still counts as a remake. Our final category of remakes are the remakes that, well, they're remade. The recent Resident Evil remakes that take the source material and change up the gameplay completely and cut out and take some stuff out to make it more coherent. And then of course there is Final Fantasy VII Remake. This game, although it has the name Remake, is practically a new game at this point, and that's the way I would classify these final types of remakes, sequels-ish remakes. Keeping the essence of the original game and fleshing it out to create a different telling from the original. FF7 Remake, for instance, is essentially about... Okay, I'm done. The story is too confusing, but if you played the game, you will know what I'm talking about. And for the fans that want to play FF7 Remake or the upcoming FF7 Rebirth, just know that these games aren't remakes but act more as sequels. And naturally, because there are so many remakes that get released and so many ways that they can be made, not all remakes turn out good, and there are times when remakes simply just fall short.
Most video game remakes that come out are actually pretty good, like Resident Evil 2 and the F7 remake. But there are some remakes that actually feel like my eyes are burning. There is a multitude of video game remakes or reimaginings that either have no effort, no passion, and the game developers did not even look like they even cared. This is an instance where game remakes absolutely fall short, and a prime example of that is a GTA Trilogy remake. Oh boy. Now, the thing that disappoints me about this remake falling short is that they chose the 3 best games they could have possibly chose. Like, some of these games can be argued to be in the top 100 games of all time. The 3 games they chose were GTA 3, which revolutionized the open world genre by introducing one of the most vast 3D open worlds that the industry has seen to that point, GTA Vice City. Like, do you even know what the soundtrack is? This is pure legendary 80s music. The performances were amazing, and the world is so colorful, holy mackerel. And finally, GTA San Andreas. Do I have to say anything about this? This game revolutionized open world genre and mods. Like, lots of mods. What I'm saying is that the GTA Trilogy remake absolutely disrespected the games. It's not only a bad remake, but it's just a disrespect to the games entirely. Look at this, just look at this. The bugs and glitches in this game are out of this world. Cars are halfway finished, merged faces, it's literally Cyberpunk 2077 at launch all over again. The graphics look better than the original, than the actual remake. How does that happen? The world looks like a dumpster fire. The characters seem like they went on the rip-off version of a character creator. And everything, just everything is absolutely horrible. It is a greedy, money-sucking, corporate everywhere game that is a prime example of greedy business practices. They even DMCA'd community mods. What is your problem, Takes-Two? Another example of fallen remakes is Warcraft 3 Reforged. Now, judging from Blizzard's recent history in the past few years, this comes as no surprise. One of the most crazy things about this remake is that they replaced this with the original. So if you want to play the original, well, you're out of luck because it's gone. It's just gone. So, first of all, that's pretty a bad sign already. But the thing is, Warcraft 3 Reforged looked promising. A lot of new features to make the game better, and the remake actually might be good. But no, it was plagued with horrendous technical problems. It was also missing key features and actually felt like a downgrade from the original. The key features they did promise hasn't even been added yet. Like, this thing came out 2 years ago, January 2020, and Blizzard has barely even said anything about this game since its launch. Okay, maybe that's not surprising, but remakes that fall short often are rushed and is made for a quick buck. It disrespects the mere original, and the problem is that this is still happening. They will keep releasing pointless remakes for a quick buck because they just feed off of nostalgia.
With remakes being both good and bad, a common topic that is always brought up is whether or not certain games actually need to be remade. Games that are still accessible on modern hardware, that still look good years after release or control super well. In the case of The Last of Us Part 1, where the original game can still be played on modern hardware, looks good, and plays fine as well, it begs the question if companies are only doing this to generate more profit from fans, or if they actually are doing this to bring the game closer to what they had originally envisioned. I mean, a few months ago there were rumors floating around of Guerrilla Games doing a Horizon Zero Dawn remake, a game from 2017. I just can't see how they would implement any groundbreaking changes from a game that was so recently released. But still on the topic of comparing remakes to older games, can the remakes and the originals still coexist alongside one another? There are many times when remakes become the definitive way to experience the older titles, like Metroid Zero Mission, but there are many instances where, by remaking the game, the remakes manage to lose that certain charm that the older game had, like The Last of Us or the original Resident Evil 2. Both games have this certain feel to them, making them stand out, and with the remakes, sure, both are great games, but it just misses this touch. Like the upcoming Silent Hill 2 remake, I cannot put my finger on it, but it's just missing something. Something, just doesn't feel right. And I guess that does mean that remakes can coexist with the originals, as newer players might fall in love with the retelling of the story, and if older fans don't like it, well, the original game is still there, although not as accessible to play, but it is still there in all its original essence, I guess. As you could probably tell by having watched this video, remakes can lead to a lot of discussion, considering the many types of ways games can be remade, what exactly counts as a remake, and the most contentious point of whether or not games need to be remade. I think that we can agree on one thing, and that good remakes do one thing right. Remakes help bring in new fans to long-running franchises. Players who've wanted to experience some of the classic games but couldn't have the means to do so, either by not having, being of the right age at the time of release, or having the means to play the game. So in my eyes, a good remake is a game that manages to keep the feel of the original story of the game, bring in new fans to a series that is completely brand new to them, and just let the player have a good time while playing. And with that, welcome to the end of the video. Thanks for watching all the way to the end, it means a lot, but before I continue with the usual outro stuff, I really want to thank FriendlyFire7 so much for coming along and being a part of this video. If you want to check out more of his videos, which range from your video game reviews and game talks about games in general, his channel will be linked in the description. Some of my favorite videos of his is his video on Yakuza Kiwami, and his more recent talk about Google Stadia. Like, for real, check him out and comment that I sent you. But anyways, back to you. What do you guys think about video game remakes? Good, bad, mid? Leave your takes down below, and any support or critiques are appreciated. So in the spirit of remakes, next week's video will be about the recently released Dead Space remake. Now, just to be clear, there will be some spoilers in it, so I cannot stress this enough. If you don't mind being spoiled, go play this game. Regardless of my next video, just go buy Dead Space Remake. The game is phenomenal, and I have a hunch that it will rank pretty highly come my best games of 2023 list. But that's enough for me. Yeah, again, the Dead Space video won't delve too much into spoilers, but I will give you a spoiler warning. But there's a whole week until that video, but moving on. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good day or night, and the rest of your week, and Storm out.